Hey, welcome. If you're watching this, it's likely because you've got a friend diagnosed with a life-threatening, potentially terminal illness. And what I'm going to cover is how to support your friend without being weird about it. Now, here's the thing. Do not feel helpless because you are not. You might be thinking, what can I do? And the short answer is more than you think. And here's why. Quality of life is not just about good medical treatment. Quality of life is about what's going on up here, and that you can help with. What we're going to do is do a few do's and don'ts, and then we'll go through each one of them in a bit more detail. So we'll start off with some don'ts. So don't number one, hopefully obvious, but let's say, I know how you must be feeling, because you don't know how they're feeling. Now, another one, do not say, just be more positive. We'll come back to this. That's pretty toxic. Now, never start a sentence with the phrase, at least. If you catch yourself saying at least, you should probably stop while you're ahead. We'll come back to it again. And do not go on about how sorry you are. Sure, you're sorry, but it's not about you at the end of the day. Oh, and oh my, please do not start trolling out your quack cures like, have you tried patchouli oil mixed with rhubarb? That cured my Auntie Mabel. Just don't. And another one is, don't assume automatically they can't do normal stuff that they've always done. Do not make decisions on their behalf. We'll come back to that again. Now, here's some things you can do. Yes, you can acknowledge their illness. That's fine. You can be normal around them. There's times to laugh, there's times to cry. That's still true. You can expect quite different things on different days. And do be a good listener. See if there's a useful role you can play with them. We'll come back to that and we'll look at some of the roles you might want to fulfill. And finally, it's an opportunity for you to deal with your own issues about death. Maybe you're very comfortable with it. Maybe you're at peace with that idea. And maybe this thinking about death is something you really haven't done and aren't comfortable with, but it's an opportunity for you to deal with it better yourself. So now let's go back and deal with these in more detail, shall we? I thought I'd start with an easy one. Again, just don't say I can imagine how you're feeling, because you just can't. Unless you've been in their shoes, you really have no idea what they're feeling. For one thing, they probably feel different things on different days. Now, what you can do is be aware of what they might be feeling, and if you know what to expect, it'll likely make things a little easier for you to engage. And here's a few common ones. Angry. People get angry if they get terminally ill or very, very sick, because life doesn't seem fair. And it isn't, frankly. And possibly they've tried their best to live a healthy life and it hasn't paid off. So that's a pretty common one. Guilt. There's another one. Sometimes people have known already they haven't chosen a healthy lifestyle, and what's happened to them might be their fault. So hard not to feel guilty about that for yourself. Worry and fear. Again, not really a surprise. If you're thinking you might die, you're thinking you might need unpleasant treatment beforehand, being worried, being afraid is pretty natural. And one you might not think of is numbness. Kind of sort of the opposite of feeling stuff. It's what psychologists call hypoarousal. It's when the mind seems to protect itself by kind of shutting down and withdrawing emotionally. Again, that's quite common. And grief and loss. Anticipation, really, of things that they perhaps won't get to do. Now, if there's a very obvious emotion coming up, you might be able to gently normalise it for them with something like this. Like I was saying, as far as I know, it's not unusual to feel that way, but I would be careful with that one. I would be a little bit careful. But again, if you're understanding the type of emotions that are going to come up, you'll be able to roll with it a bit easier. Okay, next one. Please don't go on about how sorry you are. It just brings everyone down. Now, I know when you see someone, it seems an obvious thing to say. And what else do you say? Well, first, yes, it is good to acknowledge their illness, and it's okay to inquire how you are, how they are. You could try. Hey, I heard your news, and I wish things were different. If you say it that way, rather than saying I'm sorry, it's kind of more about them than about you. And here's another one you can use. You can say, how are you today? Yep, you don't want to ignore the fact they're really ill, but the today on the end is really important. If you say, how are you? Well, duh, I'm dying. But if you say, how are you today? It's about what's going on at the moment. And I've used this consistently when I've met patients in hospice. And usually people engage very positively with it. So that's a good one you can go with pretty easily. Okay, moving on. Don't go in, please, and say, you've got to be positive and fight this. Doctors sometimes say this too, but it's pretty hard to find any solid research evidence that positivity gives you a better medical outcome. What can happen if the person believes that positivity is required to get better and they're not feeling it, and they get even more anxious and worried because they're not being positive, they're making themselves worse. Now that is not what we are looking for here. Closely related to that is the idea of putting a positive spin on things. So, if you find yourself starting a sentence with the words at least, then give yourself a slap and stop that. Leads to things like, it's really bad. At least you've got your partner to support you. At least you're in a better situation than my other friend that had this other thing. At least you've got a great medical team. Might be true. Genuinely not helpful. Seriously, if you're thinking of starting a sentence with the words at least, just don't. Now, there are tools, if you like, that can help your friend's state of mind. If you look on my website, it's unfinishedbusiness.life. You can find some resources to get started with that. For example, a technique to help you drop an anchor when you're in an emotional storm. And I'll put a link to that underneath the video. You can see that. And there's plenty to go at here. But it's not simply trying to be positive, which is positively unhelpful. What you can usually do is be a good listener. So, what does it look like to be a good listener? Well, good listeners, they pay attention, they make eye contact, and they stay engaged. Your phone stays in your pocket, or do not disturb, or airplane mode, or switched off, or in another room. And sometimes when you're listening, it's appropriate to reflect back a little what you heard, but you don't need loads of clever psychotherapy techniques to be a good listener. You just need to listen well. You've got to be willing to listen even if something is hard to hear. And don't judge, don't contradict, don't disengage, and don't close the person down when it gets uncomfortable. Unfortunately, being judgmental is something that humans are very good at, one of our favourite pastimes, but please don't. And again, as I mentioned before, part of this is you dealing with your own issues about death. In the Western world, most of us pretend we're immortal until it's fairly obvious we're not, and we tend to find talking about death a little uncomfortable. And in my experience, it depends a lot. And if you personally have previously been part of a process of somebody close to you dying, it normally makes it easier the next time around. But even if this is new and scary for you, take the opportunity to grow as a person. Here's a couple of thoughts. Death really is about the only certainty in life, so man up a bit, woman up a bit, and get used to the idea. Now here's one which psychologically seems to just stay with us, but it's utterly not true. And that is, talking about dying does not make it any more likely to happen. And it often gives the person who is dying a lot of comfort if they need to get things off their chest. And it may not be relevant yet, but at some point with your friend it may be. Is that anyone involved with the process will tell you that dying itself is usually nowhere near as bad as people think it's going to be. Yes, it might be messy, but it can be a peaceful and a really profound experience. So even if the D word scares you, look outside yourself, and if your friend needs to talk, take the growth opportunity and go with it. So, being a good listener, let's keep going. Good listeners are happy with space or silence in the conversation. And sometimes people need a bit of this. That was 5 seconds. I know it's longer than it seems. That's okay. Now, I've kind of saved this one about listening for last, but it's really the big one for me. And that is, do not jump in and try and fix things. Oh yes, I read in a book the answer's this, or my friend did this thing, and whatever. If you're invited to give an opinion, well, please do so, but don't rush in to do that. And I'm sorry to bring gender into this, but men, typically, we do this because we love to fix things. And I'd encourage you to consider that in this situation, it's about relationship far more than problem solving. And part of this, of course, is finding internet secret cures for life-threatening diseases. I've got news for you. There is no great medical conspiracy to cover up the cure for cancer, or anything else for that matter. Curing cancer, let's take that as an example, is a long, hard road. There are over 200 different types of cancer, and individuals react differently to therapies. Most of the people on the front line in this field, oncologists, researchers, are smart, dedicated professionals who explore all viable options. Yes, of course, pharmaceutical companies are chasing profit. And yes, I'm sure some drugs are overpriced, but that doesn't change the basic premise. There is no secret, lovely cure-all hiding somewhere that's being suppressed. Yeah, do explore medical options with your friend if it's appropriate, but don't play the expert, please. Right, okay, that was listening, contributing. Here's another one. Get out of your mind that even if your friend is sick, they are now totally incapable of contributing to society. Do not help them be the victim. An example of this, my wife got cancer a few years ago, and without her knowledge, she was taken off this list of volunteers for youth work that she used to do. Well-meaning people thought it would be better for her not to exhaust herself with the work. The only problem was they had forgotten to check with her first, and I have rarely seen her so angry that others thought it right to take away her fun and her contribution. It's not your job to decide what's best for your friend. Again, be a support, talk through options, but simply taking things away is positively hurtful. Now finally, I'd encourage you to have a think about what active role you can play in support. This is worth talking through with your friend, and it's going to depend on their needs, depend on your relationship, but here's a couple of ideas. Sometimes your friend might need a partner for their medical appointments. That can be tough, that could be emotional. Having someone there whose job it is just to take notes and remember to ask the questions that you wanted asking as the sick person can be totally invaluable. Maybe if you're comfortable with difficult conversations, you could be the serious conversation guy or girl. You can be available when you need the serious chat to talk through options of difficulties you're having. Or maybe if you've got the emotional makeup to set aside the big picture, just relax. Tell death jokes with a friend if that's what they want. Just chill and laugh. That's just a couple of examples. But again, there's lots of roles you can play as a friend that can be vitally important. We often want to dive in and help, and this can be a little overwhelming for people. So don't make assumptions. Ask them, talk it through with your friend. So anyhow, that's the list. There's more resources on my website. And here's a quick recap for you. Don't say I know how you're feeling. Don't say you should be more positive and go on about how sorry you are. And do resist the temptation to introduce the secret cure. But acknowledge their illness. Be normal about them. Don't automatically assume they can't do normal stuff. Don't make decisions for them. Do be a good listener, and do see if there's a useful role you can play. That's it. So don't underestimate your potential impact on your friends' quality of life.